the rand is starting to reverse its gains, in particular against the US dollar. We're seeing a bit of weakness coming to the fore. Is it dollar strength at this point, or is it basically euro weakness because of the drama that's playing out?
Yeah, we've seen euro weakness over the last week, and the rand actually doing quite well against the euro, Eleni. And I think, there's two things dominating the world at the moment, and that's, of course, the Southern European peripheral debt crisis and what's happening as far as the US debt situation is concerned. That's really front and center stage at the moment, and the market is really oscillating around whether the focus is on the US or whether the focus is on Europe at this point.
Some say that this is old and very stale news. Would you agree with this? And why are we seeing such massive volatility within the currency space, and now suddenly Moody's and S&P and Fitch coming to the fore and talking about further downgrades for Greece? I thought that was all said and done.
I think it is old news, but the point is that the price has to be paid at some point. The European debt crisis started playing itself out in 2009. Recently, focus has shifted onto the US debt situation, and the problem is there's not a lot of answers coming out at the moment. Greece was the first one with a bailout package, somewhere in the region of 100 billion euros at that point. There's now talk of another 60 billion euros.
That's still speculation, though.
It's absolutely speculation, but the point is it's not going away. So although it's old news, these issues are not going away in a hurry.
Of course, we know the CDSs are also, the spreads there are absolutely astronomical of what we're seeing with some of these peripheral countries. But what can we price in terms of plays on the euro-dollar cross and the rand-euro as well? I'm sure there's a lot of opportunity within this volatility.
From a medium-term perspective, one has to be aware of the dangers that these debt levels pose to the global economy. On the one hand, you've got authorities that are very reluctant to remove the feeding bowl, so to speak, because that's going to have a direct impact, immediate impact on global growth. On the other hand, they can't afford to not pay off the debt, or in fact to increase those levels. So I think volatility is here to stay. I think that has implications for currencies like the rand, because people are heavily invested into the carry trade. And should we see a bout of risk aversion coming through, it might have implications for the rand.
So what's the play on this volatility? Which currencies are you looking at?
It's very, very difficult at this point in time, because only last week everybody was focusing on the US's problems. The dollar was weakening dramatically. Gold was up at 1570. A couple of days later, the focus has completely shifted to Southern Europe. Gold has fallen last week below 1500. Silver, arguably, that bubble has burst. It fell some 25%. Very, very difficult at the moment. The focus shifts around all the time. I think the one thing that we can take out of this, Eleni, though, is we have to be conscious of what the risks are to the global economy and what that might pose as a challenge for currencies like the rand.
So what does it mean? Are you going long on the rand?
I think in the very short term, I think the rand could see some further weakness. Domestically, we've seen some central bank activity, quite heightened central bank activity that's underpinning the rand. And I think should we see a bout of risk aversion coming through, I think the rand could well track above 7 in the coming weeks.
With regards to the reserves data that was released yesterday, anything that stuck out for you? Because it seems that the Reserve Bank is still relatively active in accumulating reserves, albeit slightly at a slower pace. Then we also had Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan talking about the fact that we're quite lucky that we have a strong currency because of the mitigation of inflation because of this. What is the play going to be going forward?
Well, this is the ultimate balancing act. They don't want a rand that's too strong, because that obviously affects manufacturing, obviously affects employment or unemployment in South Africa. They also don't want a rand that's too weak, because oil prices, commodity prices, food prices have risen dramatically, and the stronger rand has helped to temper some of that inflationary effect. It's a massive balancing act. I think right now the authorities wouldn't mind a slightly weaker rand, simply from a job creation perspective, the manufacturing sector and so on and so forth, although these things take a huge long time to play themselves out.
MPC rate decision this week. I think it's all said and done, basically. No real movement this time round, but a lot of rhetoric about possible hikes because of the inflation outlook. What are you looking for tomorrow?
Absolutely no move this time, and exactly that. I think the governor will warn on inflation going forward. And it's potentially possible that we do see rate hikes towards the latter part of this year, particularly if oil prices remain elevated and the rand does weaken a little bit.
676, what's your call on the dollar rand going forward? Could we breach that 7 levels?
I think certainly we see 690 before we get into the 660s again. It's potentially possible that, as I say, if some risk aversion plays itself out, that we do get above 7 in the not too distant future.
Fantastic, David. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you,
Much appreciated. David Gracey from Investec.